All right, so we're diving into Jeff Keller's Attitude is Everything today.
Okay.
You shared some excerpts, and we're going to kind of unpack like all this wisdom and stuff about how shifting your attitude can really make a difference in your journey to success.
Yeah.
And we'll get into all those principles that Keller talks about.
And it's funny because I think sometimes when you hear attitude, it's like this fluffy thing, right? You just like slap a smile on it, everything's good.
Yeah.
But he really grounds it. Like he uses this analogy of attitude being like a window.
Oh, I like that.
To the world. Yeah. So, we've all had those days where you're like looking out at the world through a dirty, smudged window.
Yeah.
Right? And everything just seems a bit dimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's harder.
And he doesn't just use the analogy and throws it out there.
Yeah.
He connects it to his own experience.
Okay.
He talks about how he was stuck in this career he hated.
Yeah.
Being a lawyer just wasn't doing it for him.
Yeah.
He felt lost,
right,
frustrated.
Yeah.
And so he's looking at life through this dirty window.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he realizes, oh, I got to clean this window.
Right.
That things started to change.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Makes you think about, like,
what are we
letting cloud our own perspective, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What are those smudges on our own windows?
Smudges on our windows. And it's not about ignoring the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
How we choose to view it.
Right. And that's where he brings in this this really powerful story about Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And he wrote about, choosing your attitude even in like the worst possible imaginable circumstances. So
yeah, it's
go ahead.
It's inspiring, and it's a little challenging because it's easy to say choose your attitude
Totally.
when things are good.
Right.
But when you are faced with unimaginable suffering, like how do you do that?
Yeah. And he even quotes Frankl saying, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that we always have a choice, right?
Yeah.
And how we respond no matter what.
No matter what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this choice, right, this freedom to choose your attitude is actually the key.
It's the foundation
to all these other success principles that he talks about. So
it unlocks every
It's not just about thinking positive, alone.
Yeah.
It's that, but it's using that as fuel to drive you, to take action, to persevere, to learn from your setbacks. And so he talks about facing our fears, turning problems into opportunities, the importance of commitment, and then, of course, taking action. Right.
Consistent action.
Yeah.
And he uses lots of stories.
And he uses stories and examples to illustrate all these principles. Yeah. One of the things that I thought was really fascinating was this idea of visualization.
Yeah.
And he talks about creating these mental movies and how successful people use this to achieve their goals.
It is fascinating. Yeah.
It is, right. This idea that we can shape our reality by consciously choosing the images we focus on. And he even talks about Celine Dion, how she visualized her success.
I remember that.
From a very young age.
Yeah.
Athletes using this to improve their performance. So
it's replacing the negative movies.
Yes, exactly.
With the positive ones.
Replace those negative movies with positive ones that are aligned with your goals.
And he even shares the story of Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Writing himself a $10 million check.
Yeah, and some people might think that's a little out there.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about the power of belief and making those dreams tangible.
Yeah, totally. And I think,
What's your dream? Can you see yourself achieving it?
Yeah.
Create that mental movie around it.
Absolutely. And then another principle that he highlights is commitment. And he calls this the magnetic force for success, right?
Yes.
It's more than just wanting something.
More than just wanting.
Yeah.
It's doing whatever it takes to achieve it.
And he talks about David Baldacci writing every night from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. while also practicing law and raising a family.
I mean, wow.
Before becoming a best-selling author.
Nice.
So, talk about dedication, right? It's like...
It makes me think of that quote, if you're not willing to do what's uncomfortable, then you're not truly committed.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And it's about asking yourself, what am I truly committed to?
Exactly.
What am I willing to do to achieve it? Because true commitment
involves action, yes. Uncomfortable action a lot of times.
Right, exactly. And that brings us to this other point of turning problems into opportunities. And he believes that setbacks can actually be disguised blessings.
Yes.
Right? That they teach us valuable lessons and sometimes lead us down these unexpected paths. So
I think we've all had those aha moments where something we thought was a disaster ended up being the best thing that ever happened to us.
Absolutely. And he shares the story of Dave Bruno, who starts his successful business after losing his job, a near-fatal car accident, and going bankrupt. I mean, that's a string of bad luck that most people like.
Yeah, how do you come back from that?
I know, but he found a way to turn that adversity into something,
Absolutely.
to a springboard for something new.
It's amazing how sometimes those challenging experiences can push us to tap into our resilience and our creativity in ways we never thought possible.
And that's, it's about choosing to focus on the potential for growth and learning
that exists in every challenge. And I'm curious, have you had something like that in your own life where like you thought it was a setback, but it turned out to be?
Absolutely. There was a time when I was...
It's really amazing how just like shifting your perspective can really change things.
Yeah.
But how do we like actively cultivate that perspective? And Keller really emphasizes this power of language.
Yes. And recognizing that our words aren't just passive reflections of our thoughts. They're actually shaping our reality. And he uses this great example from his own life.
Okay.
He used to always say that he was no good at mechanical things. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, He would just avoid even trying to fix things around the house.
Right.
Because he had already convinced himself that he couldn't.
Yeah, it's almost like you're feeding these little narratives.
Feeding ourselves these little narratives with our words.
Yeah, and if those are negative, then it can really...
And if they're negative, it can really hold us back.
Hold you back.
Yeah, and he calls it the domino effect.
Okay.
Thoughts, words, beliefs, actions, results. It's like this chain reaction.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly putting ourselves down or focusing on what we can't do, it becomes so much harder to take action and achieve our goals.
So what's the antidote to that? Like what can we do to shift that?
Well, he suggests we start paying really close attention to the language that we're using, both internally and how we're speaking to others. Are we using words that are empowering us?
Right.
Or are they limiting us? And he even challenges the reader to rethink how they respond to that everyday question. How are you?
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because he does talk about that.
Yeah.
He breaks it down like the typical responses into the negative, mediocre, and positive. And he's saying that even those negative, mediocre responses, even if it's just habit, can reinforce...
They can reinforce,
a negative mindset.
That's negative mindset.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of guilty of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just being like, oh, I'm fine, or just hanging in there.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Even when you don't really,
feel
that way.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I understand choosing more positive language.
Yeah.
But sometimes it feels like a little forced,
Right.
Like if you're going through something really rough and you say, I'm terrific, it's just like...
Yeah, I think it's not about denying the difficult emotions or pretending that everything's perfect.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about consciously choosing words that will help us shift our perspective, even if it's just a small shift.
Right. So maybe it's not about forcing a specific response. But about just being more...
It's about being more aware.
Aware of the language you're using and choosing words that will serve you better.
Yeah, and it ties back to cleaning that attitude window, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Our language is one of the tools that we can use to clear away those smudges and let in more light.
Totally. And speaking of clearing away the negativity, he also talks about this importance of stopping complaining.
Yes.
Right.
He says complaining just reinforces our problems and it drains our energy.
Yeah.
It keeps us stuck in this cycle of negativity.
Instead of focusing on like, what can I do?
Right. What's one positive action I can take?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he tells this really inspiring story about Pedro, who's this hotel worker who maintained this incredibly positive attitude despite facing immense hardship.
Okay.
His family in Honduras was devastated by Hurricane Mitch.
Oh, wow.
Yet he chose to focus on the good. on what he could control.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that even in those situations.
Yeah, even when things are really tough.
Yeah.
We still have that power.
Right.
To choose.
To choose how we respond.
How we respond.
Yeah.
And it really challenges us to ask ourselves, next time I'm tempted to complain, what's one positive action I can take instead?
Right. And, our attitude isn't just shaped by our own thoughts and words.
Mm-hmm.
It's also by the people we surround ourselves with.
Yes. He talks about the power of association.
Right.
He calls it the sponge theory.
Right.
The idea that we absorb the attitudes.
Yeah, like osmosis.
Yeah, like osmosis.
That...
You think about it, we're constantly picking up on the energy, the language, the beliefs of the people that we spend time with.
Right.
If we're constantly around negativity, it's bound to seep in.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, if we surround ourselves with these positive, supportive people, their energy can be incredibly uplifting and motivating.
Right. So he's saying we need to evaluate
those relationships. And really be mindful of who we're letting into our inner circle.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not about cutting people out necessarily.
No, not necessarily, but it's about being aware.
But just being aware of how
tact
their energy has on us.
Yeah.
And he talks about, distinguishing between toxic people who drain our energy and nourishing people who inspire us to be our best selves.
And sometimes it's the people closest to you, even family, that can be
toxic, which can be hard.
So, it's about prioritizing your own well-being.
Absolutely.
And making choices that support your own growth.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder to ask yourself, are the people I spend the most time with helping me become the person I want to be?
Yes.
If not, maybe it's time to kind of
reassess
those relationships.
And this leads to another important aspect of personal growth that Keller dives into.
And that's confronting our fears.
Okay, yeah, he quotes Gil's Eagles.
Yes.
Who says, if you want to be successful, you must be willing to be uncomfortable.
Right. It's about pushing beyond our comfort zones.
Yeah.
Taking risks even when we're afraid.
Right. And sometimes that discomfort
is what we need.
Is exactly what you need to grow.
It's
easy to just stay stuck.
Stay in those ruts.
In your routine, even if it's not
serving you.
And Keller shares a story about how he was terrified
of dating.
Of asking people out on dates.
Yeah, he's like, my strategy was to avoid rejection by never asking anyone out.
Yeah, and then, of course...
It just led to more loneliness and self-doubt.
Yeah, that makes sense. But the point is when you avoid...
When we avoid those uncomfortable situations, we're actually limiting our own growth and potential.
Right, and he emphasizes that successful people aren't fearless.
No, they're not fearless.
They just take action.
Yeah. They take action despite the fear.
Right.
Yeah.
They understand the only way to overcome it is to face it.
Face it head on.
And then that brings us to his perspective on failure. And he actually encourages readers to get out there and fail.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a refreshing perspective.
It's not about being afraid to fail.
It's not about being afraid to fail.
Yeah.
He shares the story of Sally Jesse Raphael, who endured, years of financial struggles, job losses, setbacks, before finally achieving success as a talk show host.
It reminds us that all those, overnight success stories are actually...
Years in the making. Yeah.
Right.
Filled with challenges, rejections.
Filled with challenges and failures as we might perceive them.
And it's that perseverance, that learning from our mistakes and never giving up on our dreams that ultimately leads to success.
Yeah, it's like you learn more from your failures than your successes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about failing, it's about what we do with those failures, right? He uses this analogy of learning to ride a bike as a child.
Yeah.
We fall down, we get back up, we try again, and eventually we figure it out.
You just keep going.
It's that resilience and that willingness to keep going that ultimately leads to success.
And he talks about, Jerry Seinfeld, Oprah Winfrey, Rush Limbaugh, all these people that...
All these what we call overnight successes, but really they faced years of setbacks and rejections before they achieved those major breakthroughs.
It's never a straight line.
No, it's rarely a straight line, right?
Yeah.
It's messy, it's filled with detours.
Yeah.
And it's about embracing the journey, learning from those detours and trusting that the path will eventually lead us where we need to go.
And speaking of journeys, one more principle that he that he emphasizes is networking. But he frames it in a way that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
It's not about like schmoozing or
not about using people.
trying to use people.
Yeah.
It's about building these genuine connections.
Yeah, it's about mutual benefit.
Right.
You know, he tells the story of how meeting Stu Kamen led to like this whole chain of positive outcomes for his business, including getting his book published.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he was trying to use...
He wasn't transactional at all. It was just a genuine connection.
It was a genuine connection that led to all these...
That led to all these opportunities.
Unexpected opportunities.
Yeah, it's about being open to those possibilities, right?
Absolutely.
And he offers some really practical tips, too.
Yeah.
Like being a good listener, sending thank you notes, following up, and being genuinely interested.
Be interested in other people.
So it's not, what can I get from this person? It's, how can I
be of service?
How can I add value?
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, as we wrap up our deep dive on attitude is everything, it's clear that attitude is everything.
It is fundamental.
But it's not about passive positive thinking.
Right.
It's about actively cultivating this...
It's a way of life.
Yeah, this mindset
Yeah.
that empowers us to take action, face our fears, learn from our setbacks, and build these meaningful connections.
Absolutely. And recognizing that we have that power to choose our attitude.
Right.
And in doing so, we unlock a whole range of possibilities.
Yeah, I love that.
And we can achieve greater success in all areas of our lives.
It's not about waiting for the perfect circumstances or feeling 100% confident before you start. It's...
Just take that first step.
Just take that first step.
Even if it's a small one.
Even if it's small.
And watch how your attitude in your life begins to transform.
It's been a pleasure diving into all this with you.
Same here.
We hope you enjoyed the deep dive and you got something out of it.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep those attitude windows clean.
Sparkling clean.
Yeah.